Right.
And they,
So this is our last meeting. This is our last advisory committee meeting. I want to thank you in advance for the time. Just I know it takes a lot to get through this, commit to meetings on beautiful sunny nights. It's a little easier to do this in February when it's dark at 4 anyway, and we don't know really what's going on out there. But I just want to say I appreciate the time that you committed to reviewing this, providing great input, and kind of seeing this through the process. Let's just do a quick round of introductions, just to make sure everybody knows who everybody is. Let's start back here. Hannah, do you want to introduce yourself?
Hannah Maynard, Planning Admin Assistant with Community Development.
Lance Bailey, Redevelopment Director.
Alex Duffy with MIG.
I'm Gil Gette, Associate at MIG.
I'm Katie Woods. I'm on EDAB, but I also manage Coastal Community Bank. Monroe, so.
I'm Tammy Beaumont, Monroe City Council.
Jay Bull, Planning Commission.
Great. How about folks online? Kate, do you want to start from the top?
Hi, I'm Kate Turtlow. I'm the planning manager for the city of Monroe.
And Kate, glad to see you're upright. You're not feeling very well, so. Brandy?
Hi, this is Brandy. I'm on the clearing commission and I'm joining, sorry. I'm trying to do a hybrid thing here. I've got you guys up on my laptop and then I can't speak to the laptop, so I'm speaking through the phone. And Hannah, can you mute me again now?
Brandy, you're coming through good right at the end. So if you muted your computer and talking on the phone, that sounds great. Chris?
Good evening, everybody. My name is Chris Como. I'm a Senior Transportation Planner with Transpo Group, and I'm here to talk about the transportation element of the comp plan.
Great, thanks, Chris, and thanks for calling in. Peggy?
Hi, everyone. Peggy Nielsen, Library Manager for the Monroe Library. Happy to be here for our final meeting.
Thanks, Peggy. And James?
Yeah, James with Shab. And if I sound a little funny tonight, it's because I had my wisdom teeth taken out yesterday. So.
Sorry to hear that. That's no fun. I appreciate you calling in though. Okay, so for tonight, just want to step through the agenda. And actually, before I do this, I think Donnell left. I just want to do a shout out to Donnell, who manages this space. She is the one who provided all the food, and we appreciate her ability to accommodate us last minute with some double scheduling over at the other space we usually meet at. She actually left, I guess, is going home and then is coming back to Gold Bar and coming back, cleaning up and locking up after us. So if you see her, make sure you thank her because we really appreciate the time. Otherwise, we're probably meeting out in a park someplace. Maybe isn't so bad. I don't know.
A field trip.
Little field trip. So just to step through agenda wise, this is our last meeting. And so what we wanted to do is to at least give you a touch on all of the final remaining elements within the comprehensive plan. I'll talk a bit about schedule later on in the meeting, just to give you a sense of how we're going to wrap this up by the end of 2024. Just to give you a sneak peek, we are in good shape. We're moving things through. We're generally on schedule. There is still a lot of work to do, but we are on track to do this work. So the majority of tonight, or at least half of tonight, will be focusing on the transportation element. And so Chris will be stepping through that. We're also going to touch on shorelines and environment, as well as capital facilities and utilities. And so those are the three remaining elements that you haven't seen at least parts of. So we'll step through again, a similar process like the other meetings. We'll talk about the goals and summarize the policies. We're not going to step through every policy just because there's so much to get through. But if you do have questions, we can go back and talk about those specific policies if you have them. But in the presentation, we'll just kind of be stepping through in general to talk about what we're trying to do. We'll spend a little bit of time on the future land use map. We got some good direction out of the environmental impact statement. We got good direction from you at the last meeting. So we're giving folks on city council and planning commission are giving you a sneak peek on what you're going to be seeing the next time that Kate and Lance come to you to talk about that, which should be coming up pretty soon. Other than that, those are the big pieces. Any other questions or changes or additions to the agenda that we need to include? Right. So with that, I just wanted to, we do this, for every meeting, we do have an opportunity for public comment. Susan, I see you're back there. Susan, did you have anything you wanted the group to know or talk about?
Well, the city is. The city is advocating for the UGA expansion, the Mon 2 expansion. And my understanding is that the county council will be doing a public hearing on August 18th. We'd invite anybody here to come and speak in favor of the proposal because it's gonna bring more trails, more housing. We are advocates for doing a mixed density housing up there. And we'll find a developer that can work with that. So anyway, I think it would be good for the community and the schools. We'll be able to extend the trail closer to Chain Lake Elementary, which is a school that is nearly 100% bused and driven to school. So it'll be great for the North Hill area to connect trails, connect the school, that kind of thing.
Great, thank you, Susan, appreciate it. Thanks for coming. You've been a stalwart also at these meetings. So we just stepped through tonight's agenda. Oh, James, sorry. You had a question, James?
I was just wondering if she also had the time of that meeting.
I do, and I have a correction, sorry, it's August 19th at 6 p.m. and it's in person. There'll be more opportunities during that week, and I don't have that specifically identified yet, but I will call me, I guess. My phone number is on the documents that I've submitted before, and you can call me and ask. It's also on the county council website.
Great. Thank you. So once again, August 19th at 6 p.m. in person. All right. Thanks, James, for asking. All right, so just a quick round of project updates. Just to, as a part of that, we met back in April, I believe. I think that was our last meeting date. You do have that in your packet. We met on April 25th, so just a couple months ago. We've been doing a lot of work since that meeting, but during that meeting, we did talk about the preliminary future land use map. If you remember, we broke up into two separate groups, talked about what's on what was at the time the proposed action as a part of the supplemental environmental impact statement. So we talked about some pros and cons of different areas, some policies around some of those land use changes. We also talked about the housing element, some of the specific goals and policies around housing, specifically a lot around the state changes for both middle housing as well as racially disparate impacts, emergency housing, all of those elements that the state will be looking for as a part of this, the element update. And we've seen letters coming from Commerce from other cities, and they are definitely reviewing it pretty tightly. So we're looking at our policies, making sure that we're in line so that our comment logs are as minimal as possible from them. It's good to see what some others are getting, so not have to do that. We also talked about the land use elements. Again, looking at some of those potential land use changes, the proposed action does meet targets for both population and housing. We've continued that with the future land use map, and we'll show that later on in the meeting. And then we also gave some kind of preamble to the economic development element. And I know that both the city has been working with EDAP and others to go through that element. That's been refined quite a bit through that process. And we're not going to share that again with the group, but that element is available as part of that. So those amendments have been going through that process. I'm happy to share that offline if you want. If not, you'll see it in about a month or so as a single document. We've also been meeting with a number of groups, and so Lance or Kate, if you could just give an update on what you've been talking about with the committee, city council, and planning commission.
So we've been taking chapter elements to planning commission and city council. And just upcoming on their, I believe it's on the 30th, I'm kind of calendar challenged. The economic development element's going to be going to city council. So that's the next upcoming meeting. the last meeting that we had with city council, we took the capital facilities and transportation to the city council. And, we have completed, I believe, the comment period for the EIS is closed, hasn't it? Right. So that was a piece, and I think that we had talked about it at this group as well, so we're getting close to the end. But, you know, we still got a few more things to present, including this meeting.
I would
Yeah,
also,
so-
I was just gonna say, I would add, also the master trails plan was presented to both, the city council and the planning commission this last week. And next Monday, the revised economic development chapter will be presented back to city council.
Just as a reminder, so the supplemental EIS that had not been released as of our last meeting before, so that was released. We had a 30-day comment period. We received 10 or so comments. Some of those comments had multiple sub comments inside of those. We're working to address all of those. I think we're pretty close to being complete. The next step for that will be the final supplemental EIS. And so that will go along with the comprehensive plan. And that essentially addresses the comments, makes any corrections if needed from the draft supplemental EIS. But really should be a much slimmer document than what the draft SEIS was, which was, you know, a couple inches thick. We have also done a lot of public engagement. We had a public event where we had about 30 people play the land use planning game, or for the community priorities. We did that in the public. We also did that at the high school. We had what? 4 classes?
Yeah.
4 classes, I think. I want to say about 75 students actually played that game 3 days before graduation. So we had a 75% mentally there
Yeah.
group of folks, but great input, great input. And so that happened in July, no, happened in end of May. The city's also been doing pop-ups at farmers market and some other events as well.
Oh, Pride, Juneteenth,
Block party.
the block party downtown, 2 farmers markets. I know I'm missing one.
We'll also be at Belonging in September.
Yes. And National
And
Night Out.
And so those 2 in September will probably be on the future land use map and actually the draft plan itself. So that'll be our next and final phase for that. We also have a survey that's live right now, and if you haven't taken the survey, I encourage you to do. That'll be open through the end of the month. It is a bit of a unique survey where we have fewer respondents, but we have a ton more comments and conversation within each of the goals and policies. And so there's a lot of discussion about, you know, if we require people to sign up, does that, you know, kind of make them not want to be a part of the survey? And sometimes that's true. What we found with that survey, though, is that while there may be fewer total people responding, the conversation is much deeper within that. And so if you start to look through some of those comments, you can see people, you know, elevating conversations, disagreeing, agreeing, and that really helps when you start talking about a policy. You know, what's the impact or you know, positive effects of that. So we'll have that live through the end of the month, and then we'll shut this phase of work down so that we can wrap up the draft plan. So all that'll be incorporated there. And we'll have a report out to Planning Commission, City Council on that as well as a part of how that's incorporated.
Brandy's hand is up.
Oh, Brandy, do you have a question?
Yeah, about the survey. So are people's comments connected to their name? Or is it you just have the names of the respondents, but you can't tell what their comments were? I had someone ask me because it was reported that they felt it was a barrier having to sign up. And so I wanted to just answer that question for them.
Yes, and so you can sign up as anonymous. That is still tracked with the comments. And so we worked with the developer. The developer is actually out of Seattle. And they, like City of Seattle, has used this and others. And there's a balance where if you do require people to sign up, it generally keeps the conversation a little cleaner. If you have people where they can just go in and make comments, particularly on controversial issues, it can be kind of challenging to manage and moderate that. And so that's the decision of the developer for this. They feel pretty strongly about it. And so Brandy, to your point, yes, that is attached to it. But it is a way to, no survey is perfect, but that is something that, we acknowledge as a part of this, that there is potentially a barrier there. If people don't want to provide their, even their email or anything like that.
Thank you. Can you mute me?
But thanks, Hannah, for managing this. All right, so let's turn it over to transportation. And as I do that, I think, Chris, you wanted to share some preamble on this, is that correct?
Yeah, I just want to give a short introduction to help everybody understand the process that we went through to help the city of Monroe understand, all the things that have changed with the Growth Management Act, as well as the requirements that the Puget Sound Regional Council, which is the Metropolitan Planning Organization and Regional Transportation Planning Organization under GMA. This city is required to meet all of the requirements in PSRC's Vision 2050. And the last time the city did this, they were required to meet all the requirements in Vision 2040. and several things have changed. So I just kind of want to provide some background. And the way that I would like to do that is I would like to try to share my screen, if that's okay. Can everybody see my screen? Whoops. There we go. Can everybody see my screen now?
Yep.
Okay, so what you're seeing here, we went through a process that we'll call a goal and policy audit. You can think of it as a strength test. And what we did is we took the existing goals and policies in the previous comprehensive plan transportation element. We looked at all of the requirements for GMA, including all of the legislative changes that were made. And then we also looked at what's required in Vision 2050. And what you see on the spreadsheet here is this page here. This is straight out of the minimum requirements for GMA and PSRC. It's got all the references here. I'm sorry.
A little bit larger.
Oh, sure. I'm sorry. There you go. Is that a little bit better?
One more. There you go. Perfect.
What
Okay.
page is stress?
This is not on. This is not
Yeah, this is a working document, and I'm not going to go through every line. This is a tremendous amount of information. I'm just trying to provide some context so you can all understand that there was a lot of work that went into establishing the new goals and policies and trying to make sure that they were consistent and compliant with the Growth Management Act and the requirements of Puget Sound Regional Council. Because unlike other elements of the comprehensive plan, the transportation element has to be certified by the Regional Transportation Planning Organization, Puget Sound Regional Council, as well as the Department of Commerce. And so that's a little bit more robust than some of the scrutiny that the other elements get. So it's important that, we understand what the requirements are and whether the goals and policies meet those requirements. So again, this is just a listing of all the references and requirements and by category. We wanted to make sure we hit all of the topic areas. Again, RCWs over here. What we did then is we took all of the existing goals and policies that the city of Monroe had, and we came up with these kind of 8 goal categories in the gray band here. First one, implement the regional transportation plan. That's straight out of Vision 2050. The other thing is, in addition to the GMA legislative amendments, we have this asterisk here, and you'll see it over here on the far left. These are things that changed from Vision 2040 to Vision 2050. And so we're just trying to make sure that the city of Monroe's goals and policies were, where necessary, tweaked to be a little bit stronger and a little bit more compliant with what's being asked for. And so you can see that the city actually is in pretty good shape. Green indicates compliance and consistency. Yellow is like, well, it's pretty much there, but maybe it could be a little bit stronger. And red is typically there's not a policy, not a goal, not a policy, or maybe there's new language that could be better. And so as you can see, as we go down, Monroe was in pretty good shape, especially considering all the changes that were made. And I mean, even some of the stuff that's newly required, Monroe had partially addressed already. And then you keep going down, you can see just in the different categories and all the policies, like Alex said, we're not going to go over every policy, but what you can see happening is there's recommendations with the underline and the strike through to try to strengthen the goals and policies to be as compliant or as strong as possible, and make sure that it's also carrying out the local priorities for the community. There's a couple in here where there was no goal. This one happens to be supporting people. And, this has to do with racial issues and social equity in particular. So some new language was put in there, and that is reflected in the plan. There's some optional policies that are recommended that Monroe already had, and they're just basically supplementing what the minimal requirements were, which makes it even better. There were no goals specific to the economy, so some recommendations were made there. Environment over here, you can see these are some new requirements for clean transportation and some stormwater stuff. Monroe had already partially addressed some of that. Then we get down here into some of the inventory and finance stuff, and some of these, like this one, it's not necessarily that it's required, it's just a really good idea to have an inventory and an ongoing process to make sure that everybody is made aware each year what the state of the transportation system is in. And so then one of the more important ones for both GMA and PSRC is multimodal level of service standards. And that's well addressed in the document now. So again, we get down here into the finance. We just wanted to make sure that there were some very specific goals and policies that addressed what GMA and PSRC were asking for. And we get down here to airports. There's an airfield in Monroe that's addressed here. And then there was a bunch of other goals and policies that are not necessary to meet the minimum requirements. However, completely up to the city to decide what they wanted to do with those. We just left them in there for decisions to be made. And then after the strength test was done, we just took the recommendations and put it in a clean format. And from here, these things all go into the transportation element. I just want to very quickly talk about multimodal level of service, just to make sure everybody understands what we're trying to do with this. And the Growth Management Act changed to include, instead of just vehicle level of service, and there was an important change made there in terms of it's not just looking at intersections any longer. Now it's looking at corridor travel time. I'm not going to get into details about that. It's just a change in methodology. But GMA also requires level of service standards for pedestrian and bicycle and transit, but the city doesn't control transit, so it's a little more complicated. With pedestrian, though, it's pretty much an inventory exercise. What we're trying to do is establish a pedestrian network. And the part of the network that's completed is in great shape and meets the standards. The part that isn't yet completed is telling us, oh, okay, well, this is where some projects are needed. And that's the intent of level of service standards. So here's your inventory for pedestrian and bicycle facilities in Monroe as they exist today. And then this is establishing a pedestrian network that you can see here. It's the blue and the brown lines. The brown is off-street facilities or trails. And then there's also I wanted to show you the bicycle network. Here's what the bicycle network is supposed to look like when it's completed. I'm going to go back really quick here. And so with the pedestrian network, again, the red is indicating where there's gaps in the pedestrian network. There isn't a sidewalk facility in these particular locations. The orange is a partially complete or something that maybe allows walking, but not to the level that's desired. And so it's simply a measurement saying, hey, this is the status of the network. This is where it meets code in green and where it doesn't in orange and red, and those will become our projects over time. The same is true with the bicycle network, and here's what you can see there. These are all bicycle or trail facilities, and then what's shown in red, those do not exist at this time. And what that helps the city do is establish, oh, okay, well, over time, we're going to make sure that the city is funding projects in these areas. I'm sorry if anybody's getting dizzy by this. I just want to take you down to the project map. So that translates into, this is the recommendation for where improvements should happen. And this is a really important process in the transportation element. I just wanted to walk you through that so you can understand how do we get to that project list. And I'm gonna stop there, and I'm gonna stop sharing my screen, and I'm gonna let Alex go ahead and run through the slides. I feel like that should provide some background for everybody to at least understand how we got to where we're at.
Thanks, Chris. And as we do, this is in your packet, the transportation plan is in your packet. And so we'll step through the major goals with summaries of those policies, because they do get fairly complex in how they're written. But to Chris's point is that the transportation element does have some special requirements in terms of review and approval. And so that's why there's more focus placed on this, and why you see a little bit more density in terms of specific project lists, analysis of, key elements and connections, really because a lot of those are new requirements as a part of the multimodal level of service. So you're seeing a lot more of this than what you have in your current comprehensive plan. Is that fair, Chris?
Yeah, that's a good way to put it. Really what it's trying to do is set the city up for a way for everybody to get around, regardless of how they choose to travel. It's trying to get at quality of life issues. It's focused, it's trying to integrate land use and transportation by focusing density in the core part of the city, which, makes it more walkable and bikeable, and hopefully at some point transit services available for people to have other ways to get around. Another really important point is GMA now requires that cities and counties have ADA transition plans, and those need to be addressed in the comprehensive plan. And of course, it's all integrated. You want to see those kinds of facilities close to where people are living and shopping and playing. And that is what improves quality of life for the city residents.
So just to confirm, Chris, I believe Patrick was in front of Planning Commission, or was it City Council? Really, I know one.
It was City Council.
City Council. So you've seen part of this already. So Planning Commission, you will see this coming up. All right, so let's step through this. And so Chris, just kind of tell me when to move forward on things. We have a couple of these for each slide.
Yeah, and so I'm not going to read these. You guys are perfectly capable of reading the words, but what we're trying to show here is, like Alex said earlier, up top is kind of the big goal heading and the intent, and then below that is just kind of a summary listing all of the different things that particular category is trying to accomplish. And when you look at the transportation element, you'll see a big goal statement, and then you'll see probably 6, 7 or more goals under that. In most cases, trying to lay out a plan or what I'll call a recipe for how are they going to achieve that goal. There's a variety of ways that each goal can be achieved. So, multifaceted, land use, transportation, economic, environment, it's all wrapped up into one big ball of wax. And this really is a big balancing act. As transportation, there's a bunch of things that want to be accomplished. Well, that's got to be balanced with the way that the city is planning its land use and its housing and all the other things that go into the comp plan. So multimodal transportation, we've already talked about that and the effect it has on quality of life. Number 2 is just literally getting at, where people live and trying to connect that to where they use services, commercial areas, shopping, making sure that neighborhood character is protected, and then ultimately making sure that what Monroe is doing is both environmentally and financially sustainable. And again, you see multimodal, and this is a really, really big theme in both GMA and PSRC, because land use and transportation cannot be separated. They're fully integrated, and even more so now in the GMA and PSRC requirements. So you're going to see that word throughout the document and throughout the goals and policies. This one in particular is prioritizing equity and accessibility. I mentioned the ADA compliance. Social equity is a really huge part of what we do. And importantly, if the city wants to go after grant funding, not only does it have to show that it's got things like a complete streets ordinance or multimodal approach to transportation planning, it has to show that it's using equity as one of the priority factors in terms of which projects are the most important in the city. It's got to show that it can meet ADA standards, all of those things. You're either required to do it in grant funding applications now, or you score points for it, or they at least want to know that you have it. So it's in everything, and that's where the money's at, that and safety. Supporting local regional economy, there's a lot of money out there that can be had for economic development projects that can be wrapped into or tied to transportation. Obviously, freight movement is critical. State highways are critical. Tourism plays a big part in the regional economy, and that, people coming to and from Monroe and going through to other destinations. So that's what this section's about.
And Chris, I just want to point out, goal 3, specifically identifies ADA compliance. So that's, one of those requirements there. So that's starting to get integrated into the policies there to make sure we're consistent.
Yes. Again, both GMA and PSRC are talking about supporting the environment, whether you're talking about making sure that culverts under roadways are allowing fish passage. And in fact, any state or federally funded project these days will not move forward if it doesn't have fish passage improvements in it. And if you want to get grant money, you've really got to try to wrap those improvements into the projects that you do. So you're kind of accomplishing multiple goals with singular projects that, there's a saying out there these days where there's not as many transportation projects. Really, it's a bunch of stormwater projects with asphalt on top of them. And the same is true with fish passage. The state is under a mandate from the Supreme Court to make sure that salmon streams are enhanced and that fish passage is attended to under all state highways and roads. And the cost is in the billions of dollars. But that's what this is trying to accomplish, is making sure that the transportation system is enhancing and supporting the natural environment and taking care of what needs to be taken care of along the roadways or under the roadways. Then number 6 here, this is more pertaining to GMA in that, and this is kind of best practices in that it's really important to make sure you have a handle on the state of the transportation system. And what we recommend to any client we work with is publish an annual report, and that allows you to go into your 6-year transportation improvement program process with everybody having the same understanding what the baseline is. And if there's some deficiency somewhere or a need, then everybody can talk about it with, common information, understanding, okay, well, here's where we're at. And, over in this area, we clearly need some more investment in the transportation system, and here are the reasons why. And so when you go to make the decisions in the 6-year tip in terms of programming the city's funding, it'll be more informed and hopefully it'll lessen the controversy around things because things are being looked at very objectively. Hopefully that's not a big demand on staff capacity. It shouldn't be. The annual report is pretty easy to produce, especially with GIS systems these days. This is just a way for the city to keep on top of things.
Before we move on to the next goal, so a couple things to keep in mind. These two in particular, there's a lot of crossover with other elements within the comprehensive plan. So goal 5, you'll see some references to this as a part of the shorelines and environment element, primarily around fish and other kind of components of essentially what impervious surface does to natural environments. Goal 6, there was a lot of discussion early in this process, primarily focused around equity and how you think about projects. And so, having that inventory of what's existing and then where you prioritize projects, what is the need? What are the demographics, the community, the neighborhood, as opposed to who's able to come to the city council or planning commission meeting and be able to advocate over and over because they have the ability to do that. So it's also looking at it from an equity standpoint of who has the access and the will and the ability to do that. And so starting to think about those needs a little bit differently than you would typically with your normal 6-year capital improvement program.
Mm-hmm.
All right, just a couple more.
Yeah, these are the last two. So, you know, funding is a critical one, and as we've mentioned, the transportation element, it has another interesting difference to other elements in that the Growth Management Act literally requires you to show your work, and if you're saying that you have all of these transportation needs, they're also saying, oh, well, show us how you're going to pay for it. And so in the transportation element, in addition to looking at project needs, you have to come up with an assessment of what the project costs might look like. And then you have to show what the city's revenue situation looks like and how the city intends to find enough money to pay for the projects that it says that it needs to have an adequate transportation system, whatever adequate means to the city. And of course, multimodal is now the baseline. And for each city, it's really going to depend on what their priorities are and how much they can afford to do in the 20-year planning horizon. And so the financial section is very important, and there's different ways to handle this. The city obviously can go after state and federal grant funding, and you can even say to the state, hey, we're showing you that in the past 10 years, we were able to get X amount of state and federal grants. We think we can be a little bit more aggressive, and we're going to say we're going to bump that up by 10% more in the next 10 or 20 years. And that's fine. You can do that. But you've also got to support it by saying the way that we're going to do that, we're going to have dedicated staff writing grants, or we're going to do something else to come up with a way to make sure that we can meet that 10% of additional state and federal grants. Another thing you can do is you can increase the cost of transportation impact fees that private development is required to pay during the building permit process. That, of course, needs to be tied to what the needs are and what the proportional share for development might look like. And of course, that can also get controversial, can get political. And so, but it's a legitimate way for the city to come up with additional revenue to pay for what it says it needs. And there's other things that can be done. You can pass transportation benefit districts, property levies for sidewalks and parks and trails and other things. So that's what the financial section is about. It's just trying to balance the equation of costs versus revenues. The last one, looking at airfields, they have specific requirements for both land use and transportation in terms of the kinds of things and land uses and activities that can happen around airports. It even gets into some FAA guidelines and requirements in terms of what you can do, you know, things like heights and types of uses. So this is to make sure that any city or county where there's active airfields, there's clear acknowledgement that airport operations are really important, and those are going to be the priority for anything happening around the airport, and just making sure that that's very well understood by everybody going in. So that's pretty much the big 8 categories and what they're all trying to accomplish. And I'd be happy to answer any questions if there are any.
That's great. Thank you, Chris. And so just so folks know, page 43 are where the goals and the policies start within the transportation plan itself. I'm happy to step through any of these if there's questions or comments. Again, this is, I know, first view for you, and this is kind of a dense document, but I'm happy to do our best to answer any questions or if you have suggestions or otherwise. Be great to hear. And this is also a great one that has probably the most acronyms.
Yeah, that's unfortunately true.
You know, transportation only beats planning, I think, on the acronym world.
It seems to be getting worse.
So any thoughts or comments, like, do these goals generally make sense? I know kind of the regulatory piece of that, you know, that you start to address that, but from what we've heard from previous meetings and some of the other elements we've talked about, kind of in line with what we've been thinking. How about folks online? Any comments or questions?
Randy's hand is up.
Brandy, do you have a question on any of those?
No, I
Okay.
wanted to say that, thank you, Chris, the explanation. I'd already seen and reviewed the transportation master plan, and with your explanation, it is really helpful. So I do see that was a lot of work, and thanks.
My pleasure.
All right, well, with that, we can come back to this, but Chris, do you want to talk just in terms of next steps on the transportation plan itself, kind of where you're at, and then we can.
Well,
everybody-
so I think after this meeting, it's a matter of, making sure that we attend to anything we heard from any other meetings that occurred, any input that's been offered from staff or council or others, making sure that we can kind of button it up and create what we'll call a final draft. And then I think it goes with the rest of the chapters just in terms of final review and ultimately adoption by the city. Like you said at the beginning of the meeting, that the target is the end of the year. And then after that, it's usually looking at updating development regulations or other things that go along with the comp plan. For the transportation chapter, that includes updating the transportation impact fee program. There's a little bit more work to do there, just in terms of, what the project list looks like, what the city can afford, and what the proportional share for developers might look like going forward.
Thank you, Chris. James, do you have a question?
No, just a comment. Thinking about the plan from the racial disparate impacts and disadvantaged populations. I was just trying to scan through and see if I can try to put myself in that perspective. One thing that is a suggestion that I don't know exactly how it would be worked in, but is when there are plans being implemented or decisions being made, there's typically a public comment period in advance. It tries to, get public comment. But if it would be nice to see a policy that says, the city is going to think about projects from a perspective of racial or other type of disparate impact, and say, well, maybe this is a particularly sensitive plan, and to provide above and beyond maybe a little extra public notice. So if a plan is thought to maybe have a greater impact on a sensitive population, to have a higher degree of public engagement in advance to get comments, some type of policy that might encourage that. I don't know if that's possible or not, but I think that would be helpful.
Well, what I would point you to is on page 45 of the transportation element document, under goal 3, this very specifically addresses the social equity issue and underserved populations. There's 4 policies that talk about racial and social equity and environmental justice, in terms of how transportation projects are funded and constructed. Talks about the needs of special populations in terms of how the city prioritizes those things. It talks about ADA, and it talks about noise impacts to populations, residential or otherwise. And so all of those things could lead to what you're trying to get at in terms of maybe an additional level of scrutiny in terms of whether it's a development project or the city going forward with planning a transportation project. What I'll also say is what you're already starting to see in some places, and it will probably come mainstream, is as the city each year goes into the 6-year transportation improvement program process, typically in the past, there's been a public hearing, but there's more process involved with that these days, and partly because of all the state and federal requirements around social equity and making sure that any projects that are put into that document are going to be competitive from a grant funding standpoint. And like I said earlier, if you want to get grant funding, you have to incorporate all those kinds of things into the application to go after that money. In addition to that, the 6-year tip can actually be filtered through a social equity lens. And so anything that goes into the local 6-year tip, there can already be another layer of consideration in terms of, how does it help the city meet its social equity goals? Kind of like what we're doing with the project list and the transportation element document. So it's kind of getting it from both ends, the big long-term project list, as well as another shot during the 6-year tip process.
Thanks, Chris. Yeah. Any other questions or comments on the transportation element? All right, well, again, this is draft. We'll continue to review and revise. This is just starting to go through the process like the other elements. As Chris mentioned, there is going to be some additional work on, transportation impact fee implementation, because there would potentially be development code changes as a part of this. Those are some of the elements that we're starting to consider now. We have a little bit more time to do that. That's not something that has to be adopted by the end of 2024. I know we're trying to get as much of that done as possible. But the state is giving us so graciously an extra 6 months to do that work. It goes very fast.
It sure does.
Any other questions for Chris? Chris, appreciate it. Thank you so much.
My pleasure. It was nice to chat with all of you, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Chris.
All right. I forgot to mention restrooms. If you need one through this door and to your right, don't open the door that says an alarm will sound. If you just go around the corner, there's bathrooms on the side there, but that door is unlocked. So if you need to use the facilities. All right, let's move on. So let's talk about shorelines and natural environment. And these last few elements, shorelines and natural environments, capital facilities and utilities, there are some new requirements that the state's requirement through best available science that we look at certain things, but primarily the city's in pretty good shape in terms of what's required. Kate, do you want to talk just a little bit about? I know Department of Fish and Wildlife wants to review this element. Do you want to talk a little bit about that process before we get into the goals and policies here?
Yeah, sure. For part of the review process, there is a 60-day review comment period, which my deadline in big black, red, green, orange letters is September 12th. Fish and Wildlife actually reached out to us a little bit earlier, and they have already seen all of the draft chapters except for transportation, because that's still in the works post this draft plan conversation tonight. And then the capital and facilities and utilities were not done. So I actually received comments from them middle of last week, which I've sent on to Alex and his team to start incorporating. And they weren't just looking at our natural environment and shoreline element. They're looking at the entire plan, because there's other things like in land use that we need to be accounting for: open space, wildlife corridors. And so I honestly have not gotten through all of their comments yet. But it's helpful to know they like to say they're not a regulatory agency, but their comments do hold weight when we submit this for final review. And as Chris had just mentioned, the agency that we really need approval from is the Puget Sound Regional Council, but we will also have to share it with the Department of Commerce for some of the new housing requirements. So it was nice having their comments early.
Great. And so the goals and policies I'll share don't incorporate those comments yet. We're still working through that. But as Kate mentioned, I think we're in pretty good shape, but there will be likely some changes as you see future versions of this. So I didn't share, there are some background documents for this. There's some watershed analysis. There's some other elements that will be attached as appendices for this specific chapter. I didn't attach those as a part of the element. I figured we had enough paper in front of us, but those are certainly available if you're interested in the detail that ESA put together, and they're the ones who did the environmental impact statement as well. But this is, from their perspective, what meets best available science right now from a shoreline standpoint, and in general will meet Fish and Wildlife, Department of Fish and Wildlife requirements with some modifications, it sounds like. So I'll step through this. You'll see some similarities with transportation actually, because they do intersect, you know, these don't operate in isolation, these elements. But the first one, plan to protect and restore natural systems, including shorelines and their buffers, wildlife habitats, and the ecosystem to support Imagine Monroe. That really gets to your shorelines management plan. It also gets to, as Kate mentioned, wildlife corridors and other natural areas as well too. There are some new requirements for critical areas that potentially expand riparian corridors. They're starting to treat that a little bit differently. And so that's part of what this goal is starting to do, is to set up to be able to update that. And luckily you have a little time. You have a couple of, I think, 2 years, I believe, to update those specific elements. The next one, address impacts to the environment related to climate change. So this is actually kind of a preface to what the state's going to have to do. A new requirement with GMA this year is to update or develop a climate element with a resiliency sub-element. So a lot of cities in the first tier of cities that like you or that are going through this now, you have until 2029 to add that to your comprehensive plan. It's not required now as a part of the update. The next round of cities have to actually have it as a part of their updates, but just given the timing, this goal starts to, you know, kind of lead to that. So, you know, in the next couple of years, you'll be talking about that new element coming forward. And so there are a number of policies you have to incorporate. It also includes greenhouse gas reduction strategies. So there will be some analysis on that. But there are a number of policies that a climate element and a resiliency sub-element will incorporate. But we'll say with resiliency too, you know, we're seeing this, it's not just the state. I mean, there's requirements here, but, you know, resiliency is kind of the talk of the town, whether that's fire, flood, heat, you know, any of those elements. It's timely to be putting this in, and Washington is actually kind of one of the first states in California to be doing some of this stuff. So it's good work, but it is additional work for the comp plan coming up. Goal 3, connect land use with management of a system of surface water and wetland areas that focus on access to shorelines and surface water for multiple uses. So this connects to the culverts that Chris was talking about. This also connects to critical areas for how development occurs in terms of wetlands being connected as opposed to isolated. It also starts to get into your stormwater management. And so when we get into utilities and capital facilities, part of the update is updating your stormwater management plan, which is what DHC Consulting is doing. They're doing sewer, storm, and water updates. And so that the goal is to have all of those come forward to you that will be adopted by the end of 2024 as well. So it starts to look at that. So again, this is one of those crossover policies. Manage open space, shorelines, and natural habitats to improve the environment, reduce conflicts with development. Part of this is your parks plan. We've already covered that element, you know, previously, one of the earlier meetings. That's chapter 7, I believe. You just updated that last year before. So you have good current information on that, but this starts to connect open space with some of that other habitat elements as a part of the shoreline and natural environment. The big thing for this, I think, and this is something that's, you know, came up in some of the comments for the EIS and elsewhere, is that, you know, the city is growing and developing, and so we need to be cognizant about, you know, about wetlands and about natural areas. They're a natural entity, they're a recreation entity, but they also serve function, and so that is something that is becoming more of an issue and more of a, I think, focus for Fish and Wildlife and ecology and some of the other groups that really, you know, focus on those areas. Goal 5, encourage cooperation and collaboration between government entities to ensure transparent governance of shorelines, natural environment. So, you know, not surprisingly, you know, your natural areas, your riparian areas, corridors, that is kind of the nexus for every probably state and federal agency to come together at some point. So how you manage it, how you coordinate, like Kate said, working with Fish and Wildlife early, State Fish and Wildlife Department of Fish and Wildlife, it really helps that focus of that goal, but also it helps you with things like recovery. It also helps you with restoration and other elements. There are, fairly significant grants out there to be able to improve culverts, to be able to think about restoration in those riparian areas. But they're not isolated. They often take multiple agencies that are often involved with that. So if you've ever developed in or near wetlands, you know that it's not just a go get your building permit. It takes more than that. So that's what that goal gets to. This also has tribal governments as well too, specifically around cultural resources, other elements. If there are tribal treaty rights, I don't believe Monroe is affected by that, but some cities actually have tribal treaty rights for usual and custom places to gather and fish. And so that's also something that should be considered in how the tribes work with you. Goal 6, encourage conservation and sustainability throughout the city. This is a lot of these are actually in your existing comprehensive plan. We did do an analysis for which ones were new and others. I'm not going to dig into that as transportation did tonight. But, thinking more broadly about how, for example, parks maintenance, what type of pesticides or, not using pesticides, in parks has in terms of impact for their job, but also for the environment. And I believe the parks plan actually talks about that a little bit too in their maintenance. But, using native vegetation, using things that live here, that should be here, but also, think about when we design parks and we design these other spaces, that it's more than just, Kentucky bluegrass. It's really more native species to the greatest degree practical. Playing soccer on a, Oregon grape is probably not so comfortable. So you need grass sometimes, but kind of thinking about it a little bit more specifically. Equitable access to environmental and health resources. So this gets to, really our water source, where water comes from, reducing toxics within the water supply. That actually relates to that previous goal about, pesticide and other use. But also, looking at shorelines and ecosystems from a restoration standpoint, particularly around, you have great river, kind of river access and, kind of river riparian and park areas, but really kind of celebrating that, but also looking at other restoration options for that. So this goal starts to get to those elements. I think just one more. And then prioritizing vulnerable populations. So this gets again to, and James, I think to your earlier comment about, how do we kind of think about communities that may not have access to process, may be affected more by environmental justice, like, toxics or construction, other processes, just because of where, they live, because it's more inexpensive. This really starts to think about, kind of how do we, really kind of focus resiliency and climate change in a positive way for those locations. Flooding is a big one, and maybe less so in Monroe, but a lot of communities, the cheap housing is usually in the floodplain, and those are the folks that have the least ability to move, or to be able to deal with that if there's an event. So really kind of consider that as a part of your process and structure. And then reduce hazard potential and improve resiliency. So this is again looking at climate change and resiliency. This is something you're going to have to address as a part of your upcoming climate element work, in the next year or two. There are a lot of grants out there right now. We're starting to see those pop out that cities are getting, I think good funding to be able to look at these types of elements. Because they are serious about having a holistic and kind of full-fledged goal with that. But dealing with climate change. It was 105 degrees 2 weeks ago in Portland, and it's hot up here too, and it's getting worse. So I think our hottest day on record in the world was Monday. So a lot. All right, and then finally, preserving historic and cultural resources. So this might seem a little odd in this section, but it does get to where often cultural resources are located, where they are. They're often near rivers. They're often near those kind of natural areas historically, and so just identifying that as something that we need to consider, but also, GMA is now requiring more consultation with tribes as a part of their new process. And so having a goal in here to be able to stress that is important as well. So a lot of this stuff, you know, a lot of the stuff for the most part is within your existing comprehensive plan. We revised some of the wording to make it more, I think, accessible and clear that it meets GMA and like Fish and Wildlife requirements. So you weren't far off in a lot of these specific elements. We just, you know, like with a lot of the comprehensive plan elements, you kind of reorganized it a bit to be a bit more implementable, if you will. Kate, is that a fair summation for this section?
Absolutely. Thank you.
I'm trying not to make you talk too much. So. Any questions, comments on this section? Or easy group tonight. James.
By this section, you're referring to the shorelines and natural environment section?
Yes. Yes.
One thing I wanted to mention, and it may not fit in this section, but I think it does. I was looking through the plan and I didn't see urban agriculture as an item. So for example, with climate change, food scarcity or food insecurity is one big consideration. And one thing that cities can do is support zoning and things that support urban agriculture. And I'm actually going to send a quick email to Kate. There's a good resource from USDA that actually focuses on the Northwest and urban agriculture. So is that applicable to this section, or would that fit somewhere else? And so by urban agriculture, it's like using pieces of land that are otherwise lawns or, you know, medians or things that could potentially grow plants or, you know, that otherwise are just used to, you know, be a lawn or things like that.
My suspicion is it could be in this chapter, but I might also be appropriate for the land use chapter. And I'll defer to Alex as well as his thoughts for that.
Yeah, I think I can see either way. I can see it more in land use probably just because of, you know, kind of how you think about urban form and development and kind of use of the land. But certainly I think that's a great add. And yeah, we see that. That's a great addition, and kind of rethinking that's kind of natural scape, if you will, of kind of the built environment, how you use that, what the benefit is. So yeah, that'd be great if you could send that over to us. We'd love to look at it and incorporate
Yeah,
it.
I sent Kate, and if anybody else is interested, email me and I can send it. They have a link to an example from Portland. It's called the Diggable City plan. So there's some resources that are already built that might be something that the city's interested in incorporating.
That's great. There's actually a CSA, a community supported agriculture group that in Portland that uses the planting strips. Basically, you can commit to use your planting strip, and they have them all over the city, and they plant stuff, and then you get a little bit of it, and then they sell off the rest of it. But yeah, that'd be great. That's a great resource. Appreciate that, James.
I'd just like to add that Monroe is already doing that with the community garden. So seeing more of that type of opportunity would be fantastic.
Yeah, that'd be great. Any other questions or comments on this element? You always want to get out of here. There it is. Okay, let's step into capital facilities and utilities. So there were more for chapters 8 and 9, I believe. These are minor changes. There are most of the changes that were within capital facilities and utilities were updates to information within the element, just things that, you know, police and fire, their staffing changes, schools kind of change over 10 years. So we've updated those sections. We have, again, with kind of looking at that new structure that we have for the comprehensive plan, there are new goals with policies underneath them. So some of the things have been moved around, but for the most part, these are elements that were already within your comprehensive plan. Capital facilities and utilities also will be supported, utilities in particular will be supported by the stormwater, sewer, and water plans as well, so those become appendices to the document. You'll see those, I believe, August first drafts of those are due. So you'll start getting more inches, in your appendices for that, but you'll start to see those for review, either to planning commission or city council, but that's the technical kind of weeds for those types of things. Kate, do you have a comment?
Yeah, just before you start going through the goals and policies, one item that I'm not sure how we skipped over it in the past several years is the hospital district. It is technically a public district that the city coordinates with. I've already had a couple of communications with the Evergreen Health, who is the current provider for the hospital. So you will see that in the new plan. And I have been coordinating with Snohomish Regional Fire and Safety to update all of that information, since they were not under their current name. So all of that information will be included in the final capital facilities chapter.
Yeah, so capital facilities, this is your essential facilities, schools, garbage, hospital, fire, police, kind of all the nuts and bolts, things that make things work within the city. So we need to document all of those pieces. And then there's also for the city, a 20-year capital facilities plan. So that is attached. When that's complete, that's attached at the end. So that kind of gives you your long range plans for what they're doing. So these aren't super long, but this one, it's kind of what, as you'd expect for capital facilities, provide and maintain public services to meet growth projections through 2044. So that's essentially an update from the last comprehensive plan. But it also, stresses maximize safety and maintenance of existing facilities as opposed to constructing new facilities. It doesn't mean you won't, but it makes sure that you're maintaining your current ones. And then increases the well-being and health of all residents. And so this is one that we did add, I believe, some policy underneath this that this kind of the plans under this particular goal align with your growth targets and align with where you see growth occurring. And so just to make sure that we're doing things in the right space at the right time. Goal 2, ensure that public facilities equitably meet the current and future growth of the community. And so this is a new goal that we've added. And this gets to, again, this is kind of, we saw this in transportation and we saw it other places, prioritizing facilities where there are none or where there are the greatest needs. So how do you evaluate where those services go and how they're served? And so looking at that more from an equity lens, but also thinking about how do you respond if you're fire or police? Are you serving the entire community in the same manner? Actually, it's funny going back to that. We were at the senior center today, talking just with folks. Great conversations till about 12:45 because bingo started at 1, and it was like,
Oh, watch out.
like we're done, we're done. So, but there was we had a great conversation with a woman who said, and this is obviously a difference, but she's like the rail line. If you live on one side of the rail line and that train stopped, how does the fire department get across to, or the police department get across if there are services on their side? So it's like, I thought that's a great example.
Hospital on one side.
Yeah. So what does that mean? And so it's something that, when I thought about that goal and I thought about that story today, that's what folks are talking about. They would like the rail line moved. So their railroads are super easy to deal with. And so I'm sure that's a
Quiet.
But Alex, shouldn't there actually be like an underpass at the hospital? Because that's probably more critical than somebody getting their coffee, right? Is that
Yeah.
people can, emergency services can get back and forth to the hospital under the train.
Yeah.
For sure. Absolutely.
Yeah. And so and if you have, so if it's on one side, how do you get that person over if there happens to be a train that stops?
Not having to back. Right. Very important.
Yeah, we were working on a project in south in Chehalis area, and it floods there, and the hospital sits on a hill, and all the roads around it flood. And so it's like, okay, so what do you do if that's the only emergency facility within 50 miles? So It's real, it's real. Goal. Goal 3, manage financial resources to ensure efficient and appropriate funding allocations. So, you know, this is a nod to the city to make sure that, you know, you're managing things efficiently. And it's not just the city, it's also school district, it's the other providers that, you know, services are provided, you know, in a financially feasible and equitable way. So that's a direction to that. So I'll stop there. So capital facilities is quick. Any questions on that one?
I went through and have some edits and I've worked with Kate on some of these. I'm marking things up. Some of the sentences in this chapter didn't make sense to me when I read them. And there were terms like demand management that, and we talked about this at council with staff, so they're aware and Kate's prepared to get my marked up copy, which is awesome. But yeah, some of the stuff in here I found hard to understand.
Okay.
Just poorly written sentences that I thought made, you know, I sort of understood them just because of my position, but I think a layperson reading this would be confused. So I just wanted to make sure you knew that
Yeah.
I've gone through and I will mark those up and provide them to Kate.
No, that's great. We want to make sure if things aren't clear, we want to know about it. And,
Yeah, well, one example, just, you know, to let you know the kind of stuff that's I'm kind of flagging is 8.2.1.3. Support police station efforts to update building to meet ASCE 41 seismic evaluation levels, fire safety goals, and ADA compliance code standards. So when you read that, you sort of know that this means support our local police in updating their building, but the way it's written, support police station, you can't support a police station.
Yeah.
You can support a police department or support efforts to update the police facilities to
Yeah.
meet those seismic evaluation levels. So that kind of stuff that I think is just, it's important that it makes sense.
Yeah.
So I'm going through with that kind of attention to detail and certainly, you know, the group can decide whether or not those changes are made, but I have gone through a couple of these chapters and have some of those just flagging sort of terminology that I don't think is clear or might not be clear to someone reading this document. It doesn't make sense to me as a council member.
Yeah, that is a great catch, and that's why we're here, is to do these internal drafts, because I think, you know, if you remember kind of, think about what your 2015 plan is, and in your policies, your policy framework, we've used a lot of that, but a lot of it has been reworked, it's been moved, and so there are definitely areas where there probably are some bad sentences or that needs.
Oh, sure, or just a couple places, it's just a repeat,
Yeah,
you know,
yeah.
it's just version of, and then version of, things like that. And I'm an editor by trade, and so I'm just going through, and as I'm reading it, I can't help but I'll mark them. But some of them really are hard to understand, I think. So, but overall, you've done a fantastic job, and, you know, I'd like to compliment the whole, you know, planning department. This has been a ton of work, and you guys have been wonderful. It's very attractive and easy to understand, and it's been nice to have all these touches, you know, to be able to get back to you about things, and it's been a really good process, so very pleased.
Well, I didn't understand the sentence, just read it. It's good to do it. You know, and I think that's a great catch, and I think about these as, I have a couple different lenses I think about. It's like, if my mom read it or my grandma read it, would they understand?
Correct.
You know, that's kind of how I think about this, or I also think about it as an elected official. In 4 years or 6 years, you know it now.
Yeah.
But the people who will be elected after you or sit next to you the next cycle, they weren't part of this. And so it needs to be clear and concise so that they can pick it up.
Absolutely.
So those are the two lenses that I think about that. So any wordsmithing, you know, we want it to be clear and concise. So,
Thank you.
yeah. Anything else on capital facilities aside from bad sentence structure? It's one of the utilities.
Alex, I would just give the group a heads up though, that the big utility plans are coming to you in August. So that's the already mentioned, the stormwater plan, the potable water and sanitary sewer. So the chapter itself will be filled in after those specific standalone documents are completed. It will make a lot more sense. I just want to get that out there. More very deep documents are coming next month.
Is that a warning, Kate?
Maybe a little bit.
That is correct. So yeah, so VHC, their goal is to first week of October to have those drafts. So we can start to review them, get them to planning commission and city council. There will be a couple sections missing, some of the financial pieces that they're still working through, but preliminary project lists, things like that, you'll start to see within those plans. And you'll hear more from Kate and Jacob on that, I believe, too, for your groups. So utilities, so these are, again, fairly similar to what you have now within your plan. We've reorganized and realigned them, hopefully made them somewhat clear. The goal with these is to, when they need to align with the utility plans that are being created, so there might be a few revisions to this. But this is really about just making sure that, you know, utilities support the growth, but also, you know, the community desire for how you change over time. And this one also sets for like stormwater, for example, that ties to shoreline and natural environment because that's surface water. And so how do you deal with culverts? How do you deal with wetlands, riparian areas, shorelines? That's one that you know directly ties to some of your environmental requirements and transportation. So with that, for utilities, support private utilities in providing safe and modern energy services equitably to households, residents, and businesses within Monroe. We've got some comments from, I think, PSE on some of the programs I've seen for that. Is it PSE? One of the providers. But this is primarily about electrical, internet, you know, the stuff that the city doesn't provide. But they're still part of your overall utilities plan. So this addresses that. It also looks at programs primarily like for energy, where there are programs for low-income households to be able to provide access to subsidy to be able to afford that. So I'm trying to look at some of those policies to make sure that those are at least supported within the plan. Continue advancing the city's solid waste and recycling management strategy to reduce solid waste and promote sustainable end-of-life practices. So the recycling, composting, all of those elements are part of sustainability planning. This will also likely be fed into your climate element as well too. Part of that is there's some policies within the future climate element that we'll have to address as a part of that. So this kind of triggers that. I think this one's actually in your current plan, you know, in similar wording. Minimize environmental and social impacts of utilities and Monroe, should be in Monroe. Sorry, Jim.
What is a social impact?
So that could be, for example, where you place power lines. Like if you have, like, you know, that would be an example of if, for example, you have a lower income neighborhood, if you place utilities within that has some impact to their lifestyle or life. It's on the Fed side, it's called environmental justice. You have to analyze that. For this, it's really about where you place those pieces. So it's consideration for that. I think a lot of your city is built out, so you wouldn't see that as much, but it is one that to identify as new things come online. And then prepare the city's utility providers and services to be resilient and quickly recover in the response to natural hazards or disasters. Again, this is one that alludes to your resiliency sub-element you'll be doing. Things happen, weather changes, weather happens, fires happen. And so this is like many of the providers have to have emergency response plans. This is actually similar to that for utilities. So what happens if you have a major windstorm like it happening in Portland in January and it knocked down, you know, a bunch of power lines and there were 50,000 people were out of power for 2 weeks. So it's just making sure that you can coordinate with them to help that. Chapter 5, identify financing opportunities to promote the advancement of utilities. So this again is looking at how you fund maybe potentially clean energy projects, boost efficiency, supporting equitable access to that financial aid. Solar programs are a great example of this type of goal. But also looking specifically at vulnerable resident and communities with here as well too. So again, that equity lens starts to come through some of these policies. Might be one more, yeah. So that's it for utilities.
So I do want to point out to our current planning commission and city council, the 2015 comp plan actually combined these two elements. GMA is very specific that you need a capital facilities and utilities. The problem with them being combined is the way we update our capital facilities plan on an annual or every couple of years. It's there was some concern about tying in the utilities into that. So this was a very strategic to get back with a little bit more consistency and to ensure that the city, we're reducing risk if we have a challenge, if we update our capital improvement plan. And it's just ensuring that it's not tied to utilities. So hopefully that makes sense.
No, I appreciate it. Forgot to say that.
Randy's hand is raised.
Brandy, you had a question?
Yeah, on goal 9.2. Well, for one thing, there's one in there that says like identify and reduce harmful packaging and products that contribute to solid waste and cannot be recycled. That one I just thought, what if we identify them? What are we going to do about it? Right? I don't know about the reasoning on that goal, but and I thought what might be missing out of the solid waste reduction stuff is something we actually do have control over, which is to incentivize or require or ask businesses to recycle and compost. When you go to an event like Evergreen State Fair, they now make every vendor there use compostable plates and cups and stuff. And it's really recognizable when you're there that they're really doing something about it. And all their receptacles for garbage have all the, 3 different options. And I would think it'd be really cool if Monroe could get to that level where everywhere you went in Monroe at a city park, there was all the 3 options for compost, recycle, trash, and even in our restaurants, and making places do that to make it a unique thing that shows we're really trying to help tackle that and educate people. So if there's any way to incorporate at least some part about mentioning, and encouraging businesses to do that, I think that would be a good place for it.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. Other questions or comments?
I might add in there, somewhere in that 9.2, 1, 2, 3, 4, one of those, action items, possibly continue our education about recycling, what you can and can't recycle. If you want to compost, here's how to go about doing that. We did do that this year, with a prompt from some of us that said, hey, a lot of people really don't know. And I think Republic does a decent job of continuing that education, but I think we need to do more and make sure it's on the city website and socials and all of that, and just continue to push that and just always know we need to be talking about it. Instead of once a year, we're gonna have this, and maybe write that in.
Okay.
That, that's part of the city policy, is to educate residents about
No, that's a great idea.
how to do it.
Yeah, it's like the idea of it, but then what's the
Yeah, a
the
lot of
action?
people are confused, or they move to the city and they're not sure, different cities accept different providers accept, or do it differently. So it'd be great to say, hey, we use the public, here's, and we could do that in concert with them.
Yeah, those are great types of actions too, because you can develop that, you can do it, you can say you've done it, and it has some positive impact. So yeah, sure. Other questions, comments on utilities or capital facilities we step through? James, you had a question? Comment?
Yeah, this kind of goes hand in hand with the urban agriculture perspective, which is composting. So I don't know if it would fit in utilities, but decomposing waste could be, there's a growing initiative around community composting. And so that is something that one could help the city reduce its burden of, what it has to process, but I don't know if that fits in this part of the plan or not, but I think it's very useful.
Well, I think it gets to a little bit of what Brandy was talking about as well, and making sure that that's part of the policy or an action someplace in there. So, yeah, we can certainly look for a spot for it. Other comments, suggestions? Well, let's change gears a little bit. Go through this. So last agenda item, I just wanted to give you a kind of a preface to the future land use map. It's again preliminary. Planning Commission, City Council haven't weighed in on this yet, but we wanted to kind of show, and Kate, I want your help on this as well too, is talk about kind of what we heard from you last time, what we heard through the supplemental environmental impact statement, some of the direction that we're thinking about for this future land use map. So just kind of talk through that. And before I do, I just wanted to share the current future land use map. So, you know, kind of typical, it has, you know, detached residential, different scales, has industrial, downtown, commercial, kind of your usual stuff. I mean, this is the one you've been working with for the last 10 years. The changes that we're looking at, they look more significant than they really are on that, but I want to step through each of these pieces. One, before I start, is with these changes, we're still meeting our targets for GMA. So there's no difference or problem with that. But there are some changes on the future land use map that are proposed. One is that for your current R4 zone, is actually reclassifying that to R7. We've talked about that in the past. That's one where a lot of that area is already developed, but you know, for redevelopment or infill, potentially allowing a little bit more within that. And that's primarily for the area north of the city, but also kind of that southwest pocket. Two of the bigger changes are in the northwest corner along Roosevelt is, I believe, you know, that area is primarily residential or zoned for residential right now. Actually looking if we can add some neighborhood commercial in there or some higher density housing. That is an area with a lot of critical areas. So, you know, getting to that goal we were talking about for shoreline and environment, certainly issues up there. But that was one that the community really talked about, is having some type of small node or some type of locally serving commercial. So we're not talking about 6-story buildings. It's, you know, could be a corner store or a coffee shop.
And that's within city limits, correct?
Yes, well, within Irving Road area. Kate, is that city limits? I don't have that on the map.
Yeah, that's
think it
actually
is.
city limits.
Some of the other pieces, removing the transportation designation. Kate, do you want to talk a little bit about that?
Yeah, I'm not quite sure how it came about, the last round. It is only identified for the US 2 522 corridors, which they're right of way. So they already have very limited uses. And that translates into the municipal code from a land use. And in my opinion, it gives a perception that you can have uses there that we would never allow. And so the quickest way, most expedient way would be get rid of the designation and the zoning, because they're already taken care of in other forms. And so that's from my perspective, it's a cleanup.
Thank you, Kate. The other piece just below that is we had talked about that mixed use corridor on 154th. We talked about that at both the last CAC meeting, as well as within the EIS. Not a lot of support for that, so removing that piece there. To be honest, you know, there's not a lot of redevelopable land. The parcels are very small. It would take a lot to actually have something happen there. So we're recommending removing that to really focus just on more the north-south spine and Main Street. Kind of going down, focusing at that far southwestern area, focusing on neighborhood commercial and mixed use. You already kind of have like a mixed use commercial node there. But I kind of think, I guess for this one, it's really kind of thinking about how we get mixed use and limited retail in those areas to make it more of a, not a center, if you will, but a little bit more of a there for that. So I don't imagine a ton of changes, but kind of thinking about, you know, that particular form a little bit differently. And
Alex,
that's
there's
also,
yeah, I just want to add that there's a little bit of actual history to that. That area has been designated like that since the late 90s. But more importantly, in 2005, when we were doing the update, there were actually property owners in that area who were asking the city to have a different designation. So that really is reflective of what we had heard from them. Well, it's almost 20 years ago. And so that really is not a change. So I do want to make that clear. This is not something new that the city is looking at. It's more similar to some of the other items that Alex will be discussing next. And that's really looking at intensification of what we've already designated.
so kind of going around the horn, for downtown, you know, you have a great Main Street, you know, active businesses. What we heard loud and clear from a lot of folks is they want, again, more there. They want better walkability. So the transportation plan actually has, you know, kind of proposals in there to make it more walkable, more pedestrian friendly, more accessible. But, you know, to be honest, getting more housing in that area. And that doesn't mean, you know, putting it right on Main Street, but really kind of thinking creatively in those areas to get more multifamily, more townhomes, more mixed use within there. So as Kate mentioned, more intensification of that site to create that true space. And that's actually similar to, you know, kind of North Kelsey in those areas. You have a lot of big box retail. You also have what was originally proposed for multifamily, or I believe multifamily along Tierney. You know, not changing that per se, but looking at that potentially for some mixed use on corners. So instead of just multifamily, could you have more of a walkable kind of area as opposed to isolated residential with isolated large format retail? So making it a little bit more kind of a, you know, a north-south spine between your big commercial area with your old downtown area. So again, not a lot of changes there. It's just more intensification and kind of thinking about those uses a bit more. And we did assume more housing in downtown as a part of that. The only other real change is, you know, there was discussion, actually this came out of the CAC discussion, was permitting some small mixed use up along Chain Lake Road. And that's one that there are vacant parcels up there. They do have, where there are some critical areas in those areas, but you know, is that a space? Financially, that's probably a questionable location, but you know, we're just kind of honoring that there. So if that were to be there, that's great. If it were to come off the map, again, that's not a deal killer in terms of our category, our targets. But that was something that we talked about here in these meetings, as well as the community talking about, why do we always have to go south? Why can't we just have something right here? So that's kind of the major changes in a nutshell. You know, you see some of the purple along Main Street. You know, those are areas that are already mixed use. We had a lot of conversation about the historic elements along Main Street, you know, what those big parcels might be or change. That's not necessarily a future land use classification change. That could be kind of a site design, you know, consideration within your zoning code. So we left that on there as, you know, a little bit more bright to show that there is an acknowledgement of that, but it's not it's not really a big land use change. You already have that on your map. Kate, is that fair?
It is. The only other thing I do want to bring to this group's attention is there are two county proposals that are moving forward. The city of Monroe is officially supporting Monroe 2. You will not see that on these maps, as it was not part of the city's application. I've had several conversations with Ben Swanson, who was the director at the time, and he explained to me that the city chose not to look at urban growth expansions because it really required a more thoughtful conversation, not just applying for one particular application. So although the city is supporting Monroe 2, which is up north of all of the main view development off of Chain Lake Road towards Brown Road, it will not be included in our maps. If the county council approves it and it gets adopted, we will go through a process in 2025 to amend our comprehensive plan. So I just want to make that clear, and that's why you do not see it on the city's map.
Thanks, Kate. So again, very preliminary. This will come through planning commission and city council again, though I'm sure there'll be updates to this. Ultimately, this map will become, you know, the future land use map within the comprehensive plan, whatever its final version is. The final supplemental EIS will have updated numbers for that. So instead of kind of the blobby areas, it gets down to the parcel level, just like your current map. But that's really the next step is, so I wanted to just show this to you, get some input, see what you think, and then make some changes in advance of before bringing it forward to you. But again, pretty minor overall, which is. Thumbs up.
I'm relieved about the 154.
Yeah,
In my paperwork, there were two different spots that said, no, we're not gonna do that, and then later it said, yes, that's considered, and I was, wait a minute, no,
What is it gonna
no,
be?
because Jay and I both live in that neighborhood, it's like, absolutely not. No, thank you.
Yeah.
So I'm happy to
Yeah.
see that removed.
Because everybody always wants to put commercial on
Mhm.
Frylands, and I was thinking, well, there's nowhere on Frylands that would be suitable for commercial, but I thought, if I could have a teriyaki shop on the corner of 154th and 171st, that's just a 2-minute walk from me.
maybe you could have a teriyaki cart,
Would have to be thoughtfully done,
a teriyaki.
but yeah,
That's,
we kind of cooled out like a little coffee shop or something closer to us, but yeah, it makes me nervous to see what might happen, goodness.
Yeah, this is one that came in through the public process, you know, was vetted and, you know, it's kind of removed. So it's actually a great example of kind of, you know, kind of thinking through all the various permutations, and not everything sticks. But you know, one, I think there's reason not to pull it. So Brandy, you had a question or a comment?
You had sent in the agenda that there was like 3 questions that, you know, what do you want to see the same? And is that going to be, are we going to have time for that? Or is right now a good time to go over some of that? Because the segue of what they just mentioned is kind of perfect, because people do want what they're saying, right? They, like when Jay's kind of joking, but it's serious, that it'd be nice to have like a place you could walk to from 154th that you could get food or coffee or a wine bar or something, but nobody really wants to allow it on the entire strip, because that, if we look at what's what's gone on Main Street, all that does is kind of elongate, and you don't really know what you're going to get. Whereas with what we talked about with a possibility of conditional use permits in those areas, then the city could vet the stuff and see, yeah, this makes sense in that area, and it's a yes. Instead of right now, if we just remove this entirely without adding, I guess, is it in the zoning that we would have code that we'd have to add that back to say we would consider having conditional use for those type of things in that area?
So if the mixed use gets eliminated, we have no tools to allow any kind of commercial, because that is all residential. And so there's not a way to grant a conditional use for permit for a use that's not permitted. So if it's something that you might like to have, maybe we need to have more conversation or find specific nodes that might work. But once it's gone, there's no way to allow commercial along that corridor.
Yeah,
So
so
Rick-
that, yeah.
So that whole area, the only place that is open for anything like that might be Curry View Park, where you could bring a cart in or something like that. But I mean, I just am thinking mentally about that whole stretch, and it's house. So it's a tough one. I mean, other than that open space, there really isn't anywhere between Blueberry on down to Frylands that I can think of that isn't a house.
Yeah, I think the park's the perfect place. And what if we did like a circle around that park and, you know, even if there are residential homes there now, since this is a 20-year outlook plan, it could be viable for someone to, you know, remove a house that's now at 25 years old and make it mixed use with, you know, income on top and income on bottom. Yeah, I agree. You wouldn't want to just do it anywhere, but around that park, all of our parks, I would say this would be an idea that could come around those. I'm not in favor of whole place being the mixed use either, but I would like us to try to identify, and maybe on, you know, that corner where 179th and 154th meet up there, and then again down where 179th and what is it, 171st or something, by the there's like another park, Magnuson Park or something down towards the hospital
Yes.
more.
Yep.
Because those
Yeah.
parks, I mean, some of them
They're
are not even
nice.
used to their full potential, and livening them up, making them gathering places. Yeah, I don't want us to just give up entirely, because if my main thought when we were seeing this map from the beginning was that we were going to see a lot more integrated colors, and instead we basically are coming back out with the same thing. And we were hearing from people that they want these things integrated, their parks and walkability to shops and stuff, and we're not really doing it.
So what do other folks think about that suggestion to add, Brandy, if I'm hearing you correctly, add some type of circle around kind of that central space along 154th?
Maybe it's a conditional use for a food truck or a coffee cart or something like that.
Some
That
type
might
of
be able to-
activation.
Yeah, because that's a big park and it is underutilized. I mean, sometimes it's filled with people playing volleyball and lacrosse, but overall it's not really utilized. It's current view on Blueberry or someone. It's on 154.
Kind of right in the middle, right?
But Blueberry is big too. We just put that new play structure in. There's space there as well. It's just very congested there. That's my only issue. It's just Blueberry's a mess traffic wise and you get, man, that would be tough. I think that would be adding a lot of congestion to that area. So it would need to be thoughtful planned.
And when I was thinking of mixed use zoning, it was future, just based on the price per square foot from commercial space versus residential. Residential is so much more valuable. I was thinking it wouldn't get redeveloped right away, but if it was zoned properly, there would be areas that could be utilized as mixed use. We wouldn't lose, you know, residential right away, but it's an opportunity for, you know, some businesses services to be integrated, like Brandy's talking about. That's how we talk about integration into a neighborhood and, having a bunch of services. So it's not islands of residential, commercial, that kind of.
Want to test something, and James, I want to get your comment in just a second. What about, so there's two different elements, what I'm hearing. One is there's the future land use, which drives zoning. If you put it on your future land use map, then there would be some type of zoning class underneath that would implement that. There's the other piece, and I'm thinking about more of as a policy standpoint, but maybe this isn't land use, where around community spaces, could you permit activation like food carts, temporary facilities, things like that, like during events or elsewhere, like a lot of cities are, growing on like the food cart pod, for example, which is actually kind of a temporary use. It's a vacant parcel that the landowner is using that to obtain some money, some revenue, but it's also kind of a placeholder until something else happens there. There's different ways you could approach that. If you're really looking for activation, what does the group think? Does it need to be zoning and future land use, or could it be policies around public space and kind of activation with uses around that?
Well, one of my concerns is that there might be people taking existing homes and deciding that they're going to open a chiropractic office or, a salon or whatever facing 154th. And so that quickly will become not a residential thoroughfare, but a developed sort of retail core or, thoroughfare. And that would really change the nature and the feel of that neighborhood, which is pretty quiet family, single family. I just worry a little bit about it because it's a really nice neighborhood now. I like the idea of having some kind of options at Curry View or open space that's already existing and allowing that to be that community gathering space. I love that idea. But I also wouldn't want people to be selling their existing homes that front 154th and having a bunch of businesses move in and transforming that into something that might get out of control and change the nature and the feel of that neighborhood, which is now a pretty quiet, lovely neighborhood for families.
Thank you. James, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I like the idea of, what Brandy said about focusing on open spaces, kind of like what we're all saying. I do like your idea about, well, what if you just went through some sort of policy that related to specifically the open space itself and then didn't have to worry about the zoning. If you were to do a little circle and maybe, like with Tammy saying it being very targeted, then it would, if you had a business or someone convert a residential property into a mixed use property, it would just add a dimension to that open space. Because right now, younger people, what we've heard is that there's not really places to congregate, and just a big grassy field isn't quite enough to get people kind of there. So I do agree that it's a nice neighborhood. You don't want to change it too much, but even just one node somewhere in there might be something that, I think personally, I think would be helpful.
So we could treat that, and it doesn't just have to be here. There could be an activation. We could have a circle in a few different places throughout the city that you want to create seasonal or temporary activation. That might be a way to be able to address that so that you're not applying a land use per se, but you're saying within this area, you're allowing certain types of things, whether it's food trucks or other events or something like that.
One thing I forgot to mention is the use of like a farmer's market. I don't know how that would, apply, but, community, like small scale community, things like, more than just like I don't know. I grew up with flea markets and we call them swap meets here, but places people can bring stuff and sell stuff. I'm not suggesting that necessarily, but if you look around in more urban areas, they have places where individual businesses that don't have a shop per se can come and sell things. If someone were to develop a little bit of a space like that, I think that would be really great.
Hey, did you have a comment? Thought?
Yeah, I'm just realizing that the map that's up right now is missing some detail because we were really trying to focus on the things that are changing. But the Curry View Park in our existing future land use map, we actually do identify as park open space. So that needs to be retained. So Alex, if you go back to what our existing map is, you can see that there's green because that's what is that? It's actually designated as park. So the comments received tonight, that would be, all right, what kind of zoning changes do we need to allow different kinds of uses? So I just want to bring that to your attention because that detail got lost in the map that's highlighting what we're proposing to change.
Yeah, that's a great point. And I think what the group is going, if I'm understanding correctly, is maybe it's not necessarily a future land use change. Brandy, you may disagree. A future land use change is more of a, how do we activate these spaces for the neighbors, but not necessarily change the character of the neighborhood. Is that fair?
I don't want it to change the neighborhood, but I do think that in, future, like in the next 10 to 20 years in the future, not just food trucks at those places. I think that what we're seeing is people want a little bit of retail and, eateries and stuff around these parks and not just by food trucks. But food trucks also, by the way, use generators and have a lot of waste and don't really work so well with some other parts of what we're trying to do for sustainability. But yeah, I think we're onto something. If we could just keep like thinking about this idea and activate and not change the park designation, but the area just around the parcels and stuff around the park. Same with on Frylands. Like I was hoping that we were going to get some more residential or mixed use. So right now we're all the teriyaki place and the coffee places on Frylands, like turning that into mixed use where they could actually put housing above that. And obviously that's not going to change soon, but because they're recently built, but in the future.
So I'm gonna do a quick time check. So we got about 8:56. So we are using our time. Any other thoughts or comments on the future land use map? Again, you know, this is kind of first draft. There'll be more bites at the apple from both planning commission and city council. Any questions or thoughts, or actually, Kate, you had your hand up as well too.
I would like to tag off of what Brandon just said about the mixed use on Frylands.
Okay.
About having residential on top, because if for some reason the airport goes away and we're allowed to build higher on that, it would be nice to have that somewhere in the plan that is allowable if that goes away.
So maybe a policy is like, you know, reevaluate land use
Cause I think
pending airport.
at that
closure.
end, because we've built a lot of homes at that end of town, but there aren't a lot of services for us, and also housing affordable.
Yeah.
I think that parcel is outside of the oval that we typically look at as impacted by the airport though.
Is it? 'Cause I know the Lake Tide building is part of it.
We could add a policy, like a future policy, you know, if there's change there, that would be pending that airport. But if the airport closed, there'd be a whole other planning
Be a
process.
lot of time because that. Design, designate.
Other comments or suggestions on this that we want to think about before we bring it to other committees?
So Alex, my only other comment is just a little bit of a caution. We did issue the draft environmental impact statement. We took the items that we thought were the highest change from current. So as we're looking at minor modifications, we just need to keep that in mind that if it's significantly different than what we put out there, we may need to go back and do another analysis. And time is becoming a huge concern for me. So I just want to make that clarification.
Appreciate that, Kate. Yeah, so that's, we did bracket this, so we have, it's easy to pull stuff off because we've already analyzed and then we've, from an impact standpoint, we can say it's no longer there. If we're considering adding a bunch of stuff to the map, then that would get us into an addendum, most likely, where we would have to reevaluate some of these pieces. So it's something to consider. And Kate, thank you for the warning on that. So, I mean, I think there is some flexibility certainly with this, like with drawing those circles. That's not a capacity impact per se. But if we were to, you know, change land use significantly elsewhere, that, you know, that could potentially be an issue. So, thanks for the warning, Kate. All right, let's we have just a minute left. I just want to talk about next steps briefly, so I want to respect your time. So 2024, we have a lot to do still. So we are right now, August, we have the draft future land use map, which we just started talking about. You'll be talking about that with Planning Commission, City Council coming up shortly. We also have the draft utility plans that are coming out early August, so that'll support the utility sections. So those sections may be expanded a bit. Those plans will also be appendices. So we're not going to drag all of that stuff into that section. Those are chunky documents that have their own purpose, but they will amend that section. September, we're assuming that there will be some public review of the comprehensive plan, and that's why that's purple, is that's more than their next public engagement piece. That is also when it's going to be sent to Commerce. So September 10th or 12th. That's Kate's red, yellow, green flashing date. that has to get to Commerce because they have a 60-day review process, and they are using that because everybody is sending their comprehensive plans to them right now. So during that time, we go back out to the community to get more input. The Commerce draft is draft, so there can't be changes afterwards. So also, as I said, the draft plan goes to Commerce. There's not a public component to that, but that's why we would have our public process supporting that. October starts to get pretty hot with Planning Commission and City Council. We'll start to see a lot more kind of all the refinements coming in as we're getting stuff from Commerce, updating you, make sure that it's transparent. You have as much information as possible as we get into the last couple months. November, City Council hearings begin. So that is, I believe that's November, Kate, when we were starting that. Those are public meetings, so that we would take public comment during that process. I'm assuming more than one meeting, most likely. And then ultimately in December is adoption. So we have it pegged for middle of December, Kate, I believe, for the adoption hearings. So that's why November is going to be pretty busy trying to get up, make sure that you're prepared to make that decision in December. And then finally, I just want to talk about 2025 if needed. Assuming there will be some development code and other implementation requirements. So there will be, like as Chris mentioned, transportation impact fee, some of those other kind of nuts and bolts issues. We have several months to be able to do that. I know planning department for the city is hoping to get middle housing done within 2024. That's still the goal, I believe, but we do have until June 2025 to do those code amendments as well too. So just in case, we have a little bit more leeway with that. And then there's some other elements like climate, as I said, at 2029. I'll be starting on that, not too distant future. And in critical areas, if there are updates needed, you have, I believe, 2 years to update that as well too. But the big push is the next 5 months and then the 6 months into 2025. Kate, did I get that right?
You did, and I'm more than happy to put the formal proceeding calendar together for all of our boards and commissions. I've got the Planning Commission actually holding their public hearing in October, forwarding recommendations to City Council in November. November, the City Council will hold their public hearing, and then this plan must be adopted no later than December 17th, which I believe is the last council meeting of the year.
But you've had a sneak peek. So I think, you know, the reason why we've been trying to bring these as elements and pieces, you know, over the past 6 to 8 months or so is it's a lot. And, you know, and to understand them and be able to dig into them, it's much easier to do it with an element or two rather than, you know, getting a 200-page document. Hopefully it's not 200 pages, but getting a chunky document and then having to sift through that. So we're hoping that we've been able to address comments as much as possible so that you get a pretty clean document when you get to that time, which is literally about 2 months away. So with that, that's all we had. Any other questions or comments?
I would just ask you if you've been pleased with the amount of public input, because you really made an effort, and the planning department, I know, has made an effort to be out and about, and you feel like you're getting some good constructive feedback, you know, compared maybe to other plans that you've worked on with other municipalities.
Yeah, I'd say, first of all, hats off to the planning staff. You know, out at all the festivals and the events and all of that, that takes time. You know, that's commitments on Saturdays.
They're awesome.
You know,
all of them.
weekends, so
Yep.
I just want to say hats off to them. I think we've gotten, you know, if we look at this over the course of the process, I think we've gotten really great input from different age groups, different, you know, kind of interests. I'll be honest, I think our challenge was with Spanish speaking groups. I don't think we were able to access them as well. And that's definitely something that is not unique to Monroe. That's something that's always a challenge within cities. We're doing a project in South King County where we're translating everything into 7 different languages. And that's not any better. So it's just
a challenge.
It's hard. And I think, you know, when I think of these, I think of it as a process where you need to be able to build relationships with those community groups because trust is a huge factor with that. And so kind of continuing building that trust, whether it's your parks plan or the comp plan, that's where you start to get that type of input. It's very hard to just do it right from the start. So I guess what I challenge cities I work with, is, you know, what we challenge ourselves with is like, do you have the relationships? If you don't, how are you gonna get them? And when you do get them, how do you maintain them? And so that's something we think about a lot from an engagement standpoint.
A challenge for our Chamber of Commerce too.
Yeah.
Just, you know, yeah, it's the overall challenge here, so, yeah.
Yeah, but I mean, overall, I think we've gotten a really good kind of sense of the place from the community and so you don't reach everybody, but we reached a really good cross section of people, I think, through the different events and
I feel that the same. I was just curious what you thought professionally about it. And, yeah, our planning staff's been amazing. So
Yeah.
seriously, Hannah and Lance and Kate, everybody, guys have just shown up repeatedly at all these events and it's really tiring. And I see you out there just really engaging the public and it's been wonderful. I've been part of these even when I was on the council over the years, living in Monroe and part of focus groups and stuff. And I feel like this plan, I feel like the public outreach has been greater and handled better with this one than it ever has. So I feel really good about it.
it's been fun too. We've been able to do fun activities and
Yeah, the games and everything has been really creative and cool. So yeah, just really pleased with all of it. I just want to thank everybody.
yeah, okay. Great. Well, we have a little bit more process still to get through. I'm sure the public hearings will be active. And
Oh, yeah.
the people who've never heard of the plan will be there.
Yes, indeed.
But but yeah, we're looking forward to it. I think, if there's any other additional comments, grab Kate or Lance, that they're consolidating a lot of these pieces and getting it to us. As always, we recorded this meeting, so we'll take these comments back and make the changes, to the documents that we've talked about tonight. But yeah, a lot more work to come in the next 6 to 8 weeks. So it's coming together well, but there's a lot to do. So with that, Kate, do you want to, anything else or anybody else on screen want to closing thoughts?
Yeah, I do not have any. Thank you for the great conversation tonight. I'm looking forward to all of the comments when I bring the future land use map to both Planning Commission and City Council. Also for James, we will be coming back with the missing pieces of the housing element. So I'll start it with Chisab. Anita and I are kind of tag teaming that, and then we'll come back to Planning Commission and City Council. So just we're continuing to move forward.
Thanks, Kate. So once again, thank you so much for the time. Again, this is our last meeting. We really do appreciate the effort, the time. I know it takes a lot to get through this stuff. Just appreciate it. It's a better plan because of it. So thank you for that. And but otherwise, enjoy the rest of the summer. Almost, I'll see you in like a month, probably. But enjoy the continuing summer.
Thank you, too.
Thank you.
Thanks for your work.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, online people.
One quick question I had, is,
Thank you.
to advocate for the urban, agriculture component, what would be the best people to reach out to, at this point in the process?
James, send that to Kate and Lance. I mean, you're welcome to send it to me as well too. Kate's been consolidating a lot of that stuff though, and so that way it all gets into the mix, and then we can start to look at where that makes the best fit. Is that okay with you, Kate?
All right, great, thank you.
Yeah, that's. All right, thank you so much. For people here, grab some.